These slides so fast it's going to look like subliminal advertising. In about 2 hours after you leave here today, you're going to wonder, number one, why you're suddenly such an expert in freight and passenger rail, and number two, why you are really hungry for some popcorn and 7-Up. My name is Stephen Polunsky. I have 30 years experience in photoshopping myself into various transportation, mobility, and research moments in history, and I can share that with you later. What my job today is to provide the tweetable moments for this, and so we're going to go ahead and get ready, pull out your camera phone, because we are the most photogenic panel of the day, and open up Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or Tinder or whatever you're using. Thank you. Today's hashtag, I'm sure you've noticed, it's hashtag Southwestern Rail Conference at the Magnolia Hotel. No, not the one downtown, the other one in beautiful Dallas, Texas. 140 characters, Peter. Come on, man. And we're going to have fun because we have some outstanding panelists today, and you're looking at them. Their bios, be sure and read their bios because they're in the online version of this. But we have on your left, Curtis Morgan, who's the program manager for multimodal freight and transportation programs at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. We're going to have to work on that. Fun fact about Curtis, Curtis flew helicopters for the United States Navy. Thank you for your service, sir. Great. You won't do it for the Aggies, but you'll do it for Navy. Great. We have Yolanda Pozzi, who's the program manager for environment and planning. Fun fact, she got a master's degree, and that wasn't good enough, so she got another master's degree. One is from South Africa, and the other is from UC Davis. Is that correct? Which one's the more liberal-oriented? Can you comment on that? Steve Root, you all know Steve Root. He would have been here, but he is very tied up right now trying to figure out how to crash the freight shuttle into the Hyperloop. And we have Allan Rutter, who is the division head for freight mobility at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute and still history's sexiest Federal Railroad administrator. Y'all are going to have to give me more than that. Come on. All right, I promised you a tweetable moment, and here it comes. Allan, as you know, has a sort of an alter ego called Freight Boy. And Freight Boy is starting to make an appearance on the internet, and we wanted Allan to, he doesn't have really, he's got kind of a picture, but he doesn't have a, so we've got a physical Freight Boy here. Come on up, Allan. You'll never see anything like this anywhere else, I promise.
Yeah, that looks just like me.
That's pretty impressive. So,
just for me?
Yeah, that's yours to keep and love and hold. All right. Yeah, as a memory of this conference, like you can ever forget it. All right, so let's hit some of these slides here. We've touched that base. The Texas A&M Transportation Institute was charged by the legislature with providing assistance and support in the legislative work. There's a ton of stuff going on. As you heard Victor Vandegrift out me earlier, I worked for the legislature, and I thought when I left we'd fix transportation, and apparently that is not the case. So TTI, in response to this charge, created the Policy Research Center, and that's where I'm attached to at TTI. Which is doing research into these 6 freight areas. Now, we're going to talk a lot about what we are doing in research. I want to talk a little bit about what we're not doing in research. So these are things that we are not currently researching, or at least won't admit to it. Number 1, or number 10, this is Trans-Texas Corridor 2. There you go. Joint use of rail and car. Yell out if you know what bridge that is. Y'all are pathetic. You call yourselves advocates. Okay. Number 7 or 8. Are potholes stronger if the Terminator is filling them? And here's the backstory. This is a true backstory. In order to create this image for Governor Schwarzenegger, first they went out and dug a pothole. That is absolutely true. Why? Musical jump starter, because even though your car battery's dead, you can't wait until you hear Adele again. Not us. Gravity, teleportation. By the way, these guys, their idea of teleportation is to send a tech on your service call wearing Google Glass. And so back at home, the real guy who knows what's going on, that's okay. Not us. Uber, but for dogs. This is amazing. This is a real honest-to-God product they're working on. This is an alarm clock, an internet-enabled alarm clock. And you can see in their advertising, in their promo, traffic jam. I mean, what the hell? Is my alarm going to go off every time there's a traffic jam? I don't get enough sleep as it is. But no, actually, truthfully, if you go to their site, you hear it's a Siri-like voice that says, "Hi, I've detected that traffic is congested, so I've reset your alarm to let you sleep 30 minutes later." This is a great time to be alive, isn't it? All right, but you know, it has applications, right? I mean, Siri, please route me around any Ebola. Okay, sure. There's a lot more to it there. And jetpacks. Are we clear? We are not researching jetpacks. Okay, great. I don't remember where I was going from here. So you can access a lot of the research that TTI and the PRC actually are doing online. And you can tell from this that we have a ton of stuff up there, and you may as well just go to the website, tti.tamu.edu/policy, because you will spend the rest of the day there after you get your popcorn and jujubes and 7-Up. We're tracking what's going on at the legislature, and if you want to know about transportation legislation, what passed, what didn't pass, and you can access the details behind it every step of the way and all the words in it off our website. And then we're also keeping up with the interim. There was a hearing just this week. There's a couple more coming up, and every document that we can get our hands on that's tied to that, we're putting it up there so that the public has access to it, and so that you have access to it. I think it's time to move into Curtis's presentation, because I don't know what else I can do after all that. So Curtis.
I thought I was betting a little later in the order, but we'll be fine with going ahead now. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the passenger rail research projects that we have ongoing right now, but I wanted first to say that we've maintained a passenger rail and a freight rail related to research program at TTI for the past 20 plus years. I've been involved with probably, I don't know, at least 8 of the 12 conferences here at Southwestern Rail Conferences, and I've presented at probably 3 to 5 prior work that we've done. Examples are the Wisconsin DOT Hiawatha Passenger Rail Survey, and also the Heartland Flyer Passenger Rail Riderships Onboard Survey. We've done presentations of those at past conferences here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But today's presentation, I guess continuing with Stephen's movie popcorn type themes, more like coming attractions, things that we're working on now or that we're about to finish up, and it should come out in the next few weeks. The first one is the Intercity Passenger Rail Service and Development Guide for NCRRP 0301, which I just finished up and sent in earlier this month, and after it goes through an enormous amount of editing process at the national level, should be coming out in May or June of this year. And then I'll talk a little bit about some state-supported passenger rail corridor profiles that we're doing for the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. So, the first project, the Passenger Rail Service and Development Guide. This is a national study. Basically, they asked us to look at how do you start an intercity passenger rail program, and provide a guidebook on that. And I've likened this in prior presentations to kind of like trying to work on your car while you're driving down the road, because there's always a new rule, there's always a new funding source, there's always something changing. So what we tried to do is compile and document as much as we could the environment as it stands now, so that we could have a guide. Oh yeah, they also wanted it to be pertinent for states that have nothing at all and are starting from zero, and for states like California and New York that have had them for years and years. So we're trying to compile as much as we can into a guide that would be useful for state, local, regional rail planners, also consultants as they work with them as they go through and they try to establish rail passenger programs. We're the lead agency at TTI. We also partnered with Bruce Horowitz, some of y'all may know him, and David Simpson, and Dr. Ben Sperry at University of Ohio on the work. It describes the process and best practices for development of intercity passenger rail programs and expanding the passenger rail programs that you have. So as part of that compiling, this guidebook is going to cover project and program development from beginning of just vision. Hey, we'd like to have a passenger rail program, or what does a passenger rail program entail? What are the things that you need to know to decide, hey, what are we really committing ourselves to start with, all the way to it's up, it's running, what are the ongoing maintenance requirements for doing that. For example, the visioning section, the visioning component includes development of state rail plans, decisions to establish a state rail program, what kind of administrative and institutional options do you have in doing that, where can I find funding to do that, what are the different options that are available now. Obviously, as I said, something like the FAST Act has passed recently. It'll have some new options. We heard about those a little bit earlier today. The planning component has information about coordinating with and between federal and state agencies, how you can apply that best. Talks about service development planning, which is required by the Federal Railroad Administration. How can you get that in place? It talks through the process of feasibility studies. What are the different ways and options that those can take place? And then the next chapter talks about the FRA's environmental process and describes that and the different options you have of going through that and how that is currently implemented. What kind of training the FRA is able to provide. Moving on beyond planning to design and construction, we start talking about the different project types. We look at grade crossing safety, what kind of issues are associated with that. We talk about stations, what are the options, what are the development around stations, what does that mean, what kind of transit-oriented development dollars could you bring back in and apply to the passenger rail project, what kind of things can you do there. We can go very deep in any of these, but we want to give people a good basic background to kind of have an overall picture of these. As you move on into operations and maintenance, we look at things going with continuing as a state or regional entity to support the passenger rail service once it's started. And beyond that, we moved into the last bullet here, some targeted syntheses, we call them, but basically it's areas that aren't covered in the literature, that aren't things that aren't out there. And so here are the areas that we, working with a committee of national rail experts, came up with that they suggested that we put in here. First one is liability and insurance requirements for intercity passenger rail service. We go into a lot of the Surface Transportation Board rulings, also legal requirements to have insurance. The second one was, y'all have heard about the law that we have now between Amtrak and the states that not many of the states are real happy with, but it talks about being more transparent and deciding how states are charged for passenger rail service. And then we've got in intercity passenger rail, how to provide robust service delivery. An example there, after Boston had the huge snowstorm last year, if you remember, it took them quite a while to get back up and running. Probably have some instances of that again this weekend, it sounds like. And we've got some pointers in there that we came up with on how to recover from snow emergency or other type of emergencies and get back up and operating. Got some performance measurement best practices. How do you know if the railroad is operating properly? What are the things you can do to fix that? We've got some examples from the best states around. And then finally, the role of the Surface Transportation Board for passenger rail. This is something that's evolving. They've largely been involved with freight rail before, but some of the big passenger rail projects they've started just now to start having more of a role in that area. The second project, again, this one should be done but later on this year, probably coming out in fall of 2016. But basically, we're just developing corridor profiles of the 29 state-supported intercity passenger rail routes. It's a multi-stage process. We're trying to do them in bunches, send them off to AASHTO so they can take a look at them and approve them. And should be, as I said, completed by late this summer, early fall. And if you look on there, they're the routes that are marked in dark blue, and you've looked at those earlier today. You heard Mr. Ellis talking about some of those state-supported routes as well. So not quite as flashy as our colleague here on my presentation, but hopefully y'all got something out of it, and I'll be around for questions later if you have any.
on time now. Curtis, there is nobody with a more encyclopedic knowledge of rail in Texas and outside of Texas, and we're very fortunate to have Curtis with us today. We're going to move next to Freight Boy, and there isn't anything I can say about Allan that hasn't already been said or shouldn't have already been said. So, Allan, take it away.
Forward and backward. So Curtis just talked to you a little bit about what we've been doing on passenger rail. My job is to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in freight. And we'll talk about some of the research that TTI has been doing, both the types of work that we do, the different kinds of sponsors, and some examples of some of that work. One of the things where TTI performs a lot of research in highway infrastructure, pavements, structures, roadside safety, but at the same time, TTI is also involved in infrastructure research for the railroad industry. TTI has long been an officially affiliated lab with the Association of American Railroads. Dr. Gary Fry and other members of our civil engineering faculty at the university are involved in the research agenda out at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado that Steve talked about a little after lunch. Just another commercial plug for these guys. When I was at the FRA from 01 to 04, we supported an awful lot of R&D that happened down in Pueblo, but as administrator, I never had a chance to go there. Frankly, you have to really want to go to Pueblo to actually get there. But the Standing Committee on Rail Transportation at AASHTO had their annual meeting in Denver 2 years ago, and we got a day trip to go to Pueblo. And it is the coolest thing ever. If you could imagine, you saw some of the pictures that Steve had, imagine the really neatest HO setup that you had in your basement, and it's real scale. 50 square miles of track all over the place. These guys crash cars into each other. They have a little bay where they shake rail cars to see how you could protect loads while they're in transit. They have a whole setup where they do hazmat training for first responders, where they have some mock-ups of oil train cars with actual fire going on. And then there's a whole bunch of tracks out there where they're testing wayside technology, new types of equipment for track and bridge structures. And they're doing research on both for the FRA, for other railroads, for equipment manufacturers. It's a really remarkable place, and TTI gets to participate in some of the research for TTCI. We're also a partner with the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley in USDOT's University Transportation Center for Railway Safety, along with the University of Nebraska. In that, we do an awful lot of applied safety research, and it's funded directly by USDOT. But in addition to that safety research, one of the interesting things this university center does is put on a summer camp in the valley for everything from 3rd grade to 12th grade to get people interested in STEM education and in railroads. This past summer, in June and July, there were 1,000 students on the campus on a number of weeks learning about engineering and railway safety, doing hands-on projects. It's one of the really cooler things that our folks get a chance to participate in. So let me give you an example of one of the kinds of projects that our group does. This is a project we're doing for TxDOT in College Station. Now, some of you who are familiar with the campus may be familiar with Union Pacific's Navasota sub that runs pretty much right through College Station and Bryan, right through the campus. TTI researchers that are led by Dr. Charles Albany have installed a vertical plate of structural steel adjacent to the track bed and instrumented that to measure the soil displacement forces as trains go by. And one of the things that's going to help TxDOT and its consultants do is get a better sense of how to design retaining walls and support structures at grade crossings and grade separations around the state. And included, one of those possible applications would be a new grade separation that's in the process of finalizing design at the Wellburn Road, George Bush Drive intersection right at UP's line just outside of Kyle Field. That'll be a huge new grade separation, and we'll be able to put into practice some of the things we've learned about how to design those retaining structures. In addition, one of the things that my friend Steve, or my former friend Steve, talked about at the work we do at the Policy Research Center, an example of that is a project I led this past summer about public freight rail projects in Texas. Now, Texas has long led the nation in public-private partnerships and highways, like the LBJ Expressway Managed Lane Project, which is a couple miles north of here near our office in Dallas. In these projects, as was explained a little bit by Eric this morning, the private sector partners with public sector owners and operators of highway infrastructure. In public freight rail projects, it's a corollary, or the opposite. It's the public sector cooperating with a private owner and operator of infrastructure. We explained the statutory authority that the Texas legislature set aside and enabled TxDOT to get involved in public freight rail projects. We offered some lessons from case studies of these projects, like the Tower 55 project, which got mentioned and highlighted this morning. It's about a 40-mile train ride from Mockingbird Station over to Fort Worth. In addition to that, we looked at the West Brownsville rail relocation and International Bridge, which is partially owned by Union Pacific, the CREATE project in Chicago, and the Sheffield flyover in Kansas City. Now, looking at those projects, we identified a number of issues to keep in mind in future public freight rail projects, like the Gulf Coast Rail District, and as Eric mentioned this morning, a new rail bridge over the Neches River in Beaumont, or further investment in short-line railroads like the South Orient. Now, one of the things that gets mentioned in this is addressing many of the practical concerns by Texas legislators. Why should the state of Texas be involved in projects that are owned by the private sector, private railroad companies? Is that some sort of corporate welfare of some sort? I think you can make a case for the state investing in and partnering in big and small railroads when it serves a clear public interest. As we talked about earlier today, Texas railroads, while today they're experiencing a slight dip in traffic levels, are going to be expected to expand their operations in the state as our economy expands and overall freight grows to meet that economic demand. All of this is going to be explained in the Texas Freight Mobility Plan, which the Texas Transportation Commission is expected to adopt in final form next week. These expanded rail operations are going to mean that there's going to be more trains in more Texas communities, and that's going to mean that the state could consider leveraging some modest state investments in matching some much larger private funding, as we heard about this morning. There are three possible opportunities, three reasons why you might want to do that. First, they're about allocating costs and responsibilities. One of the things the public sector can do with a relatively small amount of money, there was only a couple of $1 million of state and NCT COG money that got invested in the nearly $100 million Tower 55 project, but that facilitation to bring a number of different competing railroads to the table to work out a deal is something that the public sector can do fairly well. And then finally, as the folks on Dennis's panel this morning talked about, Texas State, like many states, has regional and short-line railroads that some of these may not have access to the same amount of capital to make investment, particularly in economic development projects of importance to smaller cities and rural areas. As Paul explained this morning, many states do provide competitive grant programs to make investments for last mile rail connections, and that's something that the state may want to consider in the future. In addition, let me talk a little bit about some of the things my colleagues at the Freight Mobility Division have done in the past Curtis, in addition to doing some of the passenger rail stuff, had led a number of research projects explaining the rural rail transportation districts that the Texas legislature has authorized. Dr. Metcalf talked about another one of those that's being instituted in Brazoria County. And that also includes things like the Northeast Texas Rail District that's north of here on its way to Sulphur Springs. We've been involved a lot in highway grade crossing safety. We're completing a project for the Federal Highway Administration that's responding to a National Transportation Safety Board recommendation about grade crossing project prioritization, how do states choose what to invest their money in, and offering guidance to states on creating grade crossing state action plans, which are now mandatory as a result of the FAST Act. We also host a biennial training and safety conference on highway rail grade crossing safety, which include federal and state agencies, railroads, suppliers, and consultants. This year, we marked the 20th anniversary of the Fox River Grove crash in Illinois that killed about 7 high school students when a Metro train hit their school bus, which raised some really complicated issues about the connections between grade crossing signals and traffic signals. There's a lot of work that's been done since then, but it was a really nice way of our folks being able to understand that the work they're doing in advancing grade crossing safety has an impact and has an impact on people. Thanks for allowing us a chance of explaining a little bit more about what we do. Thanks for sticking around. I'm hoping that this had something to do with it as much as the $200, and we really appreciate it.
Because of her work at TTI and her prior experience with other institutions of higher education research and private sector experience as well, Yolanda Pozzi has her fingerprints on just about all of the most major research in freight and commodities and mobility that you can get your hands on. She is, can I say that you're finishing up some absolutely landmark research in commodities movement that is going to be fascinating. Can I say that?
You just did.
Thanks. Okay, Yolanda.
I did make a mental note to myself that I will never make a presentation after Steve ever again, because after his presentation there's absolutely nothing that I can say that's half as funny or half as exciting. But thank you, Steve. My presentation this afternoon is based on some work that we've done for the Texas Department of Transportation's Research, Technology, and Implementation Office. And in this project, I was working with my colleague, Curtis Morgan. One of the components of the work was to identify freight trends or factors that can influence or impact freight flows in the state of Texas. And I'm going to discuss this, I'm going to give you the highlights of this research, and I'm going to make my remarks pertaining to the following 4 categories. So in terms of global trade trends and factors, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership are 2 agreements that Texas should take note of. In 2014, 61% of Texas's exports were to foreign trade countries. And as we know, we enter into these types of agreements because it reduces trade barriers and in principle makes it easier and cheaper for our exporters to export to these partners. The TPP is of particular interest because it involves 12 countries that represents 40% of the global GDP and 25% of global exports. So a lot of opportunity for Texas exporters if this agreement gets finalized. I also put on there normalization of trade relations with Cuba, and not necessarily because I think that the island is a huge market for Texas exports, although there are some opportunities for agricultural exports, but more because of what's happening at the port of Mariel. If you are following, Cuba has been investing $1 billion in the port of Mariel. They're dredging the port to 58 feet. They've invested a lot of dollars in buying new cranes to accommodate containers, and also they are developing a 180 square mile economic zone, free trade zone. So Cuba does have the potential to become this transshipment hub between East and West with an expanded Panama Canal. The second trend or factor that I want to talk about, and this is something that we've seen in the last 3 years, that companies that outsource a major part of their production and operations to emerging markets are starting to reverse or at least rethink that policy. And this is largely because of increases in labor costs, logistics costs, finance, and tax costs. So we see that there's a move back, or at least a consideration of moving back to the US insourcing, and to Mexico near-sourcing. And the advantages are lower freight costs and the ability to serve markets faster. Another factor, another trend is the single window system. This is much anticipated. If you look at trade, CBP is working with 47 other agencies in the import and export of products to this country. This can require up to 200 papers that needs to be completed. Most of it is still paper, and much of the information is very repetitive. But with this single window system, the ACE system, exporters and importers will complete a single electronic entry, a single electronic form, which other agencies will then have access to the information. So this will eliminate a lot of paper, so the rainforest should be happy, but it will also reduce costs, provide access to real-time information, improve communication, and in principle make it easier for importers and exporters to be compliant. In terms of socio-demographic trends, Commissioner Vandergrift did touch on this morning, but depending on the migration assumptions that you make, the Texas population can increase with anything between 7 and 30 million between 2010 and 2050. So definitely we're expecting the size of the Texas market to increase. We also see that this increase in population will move mostly to urban areas, urbanized areas. And if we assume the same migration rates that we experienced between 2000 and 2010, we see that by 2050, the Hispanic population will be 2.5 times the non-Hispanic white population. So overall, we see a larger Texas, more people, mostly Hispanic, mostly urban, and probably younger than what we had in 2010. And this will have, I think, interesting implications for what this generations, the younger generations, the millennials and the hybrids buy, and also their expectation for freight transportation. In terms of environmental trends, we see a number of physical changes to the environment. I mean, this is very well documented in the environmental and climate change literature. This could potentially impact transportation infrastructure and disrupt supply chains. This is the theory. This is the theory. But I think what really hits it home is the number of extreme weather events or climate disasters that the U.S. experienced in 2015. This map shows that we had experienced 10 extreme weather events in 2015, each of which cost the country more than $1 billion. So the challenges for transportation, environmental sustainability is also important to industry. In a survey of supply chain executives, 40% said that sustainability is extremely important to their business. So we see interest in renewable and alternative fuels, improved vehicle utilization, switching to more cleaner modes. And then finally, the consumer is starting to take note. We see campaigns for buying local, demand for more sustainably produced products, and an interest in the carbon footprint of products. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about technology, electronic commerce, online shopping. Amazon and eBay was really the pioneers in this sector. We're expecting online shopping and electronic commerce to continue to grow as this internet speeds up and smartphones becomes even more prevalent. So e-commerce and online shopping has definitely reduced supply chain transaction time, but it has also, I would say, put a burden on the urban transportation system in that we have more demand for last mile small package delivery. So now the big question is, what is customers' expectations for delivery of online shopping? Is same-day delivery basically inevitable? And in this same survey of the supply chain executives, 42% of the respondents felt that same-day delivery is inevitable. Already we're seeing Amazon and Google providing same-day delivery services in certain markets. 3D printing. 3D printing is a transformational technology. The whole idea about 3D printing is that the products will be delivered or produced closer to the final destination. So instead of the cell phone covers being shipped from China to the US market, what will probably happen is plastic pellets will move to the place where the 3D printer is, and the cell phone covers will be printed there. So this will, of course, lead to raw materials will need to be shipped, which can have interesting impacts on the supply chain. This is the trends, the predicted trends. I mean, it was a little bit scary for me, but apparently Boeing already prints 36 of their parts, 36 parts on their 787 is being produced with 3D printing. GE has invested tens of millions of dollars in adding to their free printing capacity also. In terms of big, massive data, this is all the data that companies generate, point of sale data, GPS coordinates, call center logs, online activity. We see that companies like Walmart and Zara, UPS have used this massive amounts of data to gain new insight and to add value to their business models. But big data is just big data. It really requires analytics to analyze the information and to use it appropriately. But potential benefits of big data is optimized capacity utilization, improve customer experience, and also to reduce risk. And then finally, automated and connected vehicles. There's a lot of interest at both the state and national level in automated trucks and truck platoons. I mean, TTI is doing a lot of research and are involved in a number of initiatives concerning this technology. It seems that the technology is getting there, but there's a number of hurdles that still needs to be overcome, and I've listed some of them there. So that concludes my presentation, and I will answer any questions.
I'm going to take the opportunity to wrap up a few minutes early so that we can get into the next session. But I do want to say that as far back as I can remember, which is 1984, when I started with the House Transportation Committee, there has never been a more constant, well-reasoned, active, vocal, presence in favor of supporting passenger rail, but rail in general, at the Texas legislature than the Texas Rail Advocates. And I think y'all deserve a lot of credit for providing that voice at the legislature. So give yourselves, and thank all of y'all for being up here, and we'll now return this microphone back to y'all.